And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 255. Today we're going to be talking about, well, in fact, we're going to be reviewing the submissions for the negative space challenge. So 2 weeks ago, I talked all about the notion of negative space, what it is and how it becomes a really powerful tool in our toolbox for photography. So I then set a challenge and people have been sending their images. Plus there's the usual chat and general stuff. So if you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know where the weather's from. Let me know where the weather's from, what the weather's like where you're from, and we can make a start. Okay, let's make a start. So yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 255. So yes, it is the Negative Space Challenge. So we've had 11 people send in photos, so we're going to go through these. Most of them are fairly straightforward, but a little bit of comment, a chance to sort of look at them. And the real notion of these challenges is to give you inspiration and to see how others have tackled the very same topic. Practically everybody who watches these podcasts tends to be involved in some kind of challenges, sort of competitions and challenges and stuff like that, whether it's with your local camera club or whether you're online with things like Photo Crowd, Guru Shots, or sometimes even if it's just with your friends and you like going off. And I had a client for a while who she didn't kind of join any clubs or groups or anything, but she did travel a lot and would sort of do various bits of photography. But she wanted to improve her photography basically because her and her friends did photography when they went travel, and she wanted hers to just be that little bit better. There's a competitive streak in all of us on one level or another. So what we're going to be doing is seeing not just, so I talked about the negative space and these challenges then are about, so you can see how other people have responded to it in the same way. And that's part of the fun of it. And of course, I'll be dishing out smug points as well. So you get 10 smug points if you put an image in for this challenge. And then at the end of this, I'll be giving a bonus 30, 20 and 10 smug points to my top 3 choices. And it's all a bit of fun. I've started to worry slightly that some people might be getting a little bit hung up on maybe getting a sort of sense of rejection if they don't score highly in the smug points. These smug points really are just a bit of fun. Don't take them too seriously. A little bit of light-hearted interaction. But I'm also going to introduce something slightly new with the smug points this week, and we're coming on a suggestion from Susan. Susan noticed last week that we were chatting a lot. I did the polls when I was talking, doing the discussion bit, and and the polls seemed to go down quite well. And Susan said to me in an email this week when she was sending me her entry for today, she said, "Well, what about if you did a Could we have like a viewers poll on what image we think is the favourite?" So I'm going to give that one a go later on. If I forget, give me a nudge in the comments. But basically the idea is that when we come to the end of this, you're going to get the chance to vote for your winner. I don't know whether any of the votes are actually, whether when you click a vote it says who's voted for who, but I get a number that comes up that says so I can count up who, and it'll just be for your favourite rather than top. And whoever gets the crowd favourite, shall we say, will get a bonus 20 smug points as well. So a little bit of fun here. So you get the judge vote and you get the crowd vote. And will it be the same or will it be different? So that will be fun. Going on this, I've already made up my mind what my top 3 will be. Your idea is to vote for yours, and I will get you to vote for yours before I say what mine is, so that there's no influence either way. Okay, so hope that's a little bit of fun. So just to kind of run back on that notion of what smug points we're at. So currently sitting 4. So yes, this is where it all happens. So in August, 4th August, currently leading is Janet is on 55 smug points, Viji is on 35 smug points, and Marilyn is on 30. So all to play for today, depending on who gets ranked where, who submitted, who turns up. And don't forget, if you leave a comment here, you get 5 smug points just for turning up. So let me know you're here and gain those, because you never know if those 5 little smug points might be all important. Because whoever wins the August, which is, of course, it's the last day of August today, so whoever accumulates the most smug points for August gets to choose the challenge for September. So have a start thinking about that. So I see we've got some comments in already. Robert from Texas says, howdy all from southern Mississippi. Okay, Robert's not in Texas. He says, driving up the Natchez Trace Parkway to Franklin, Tennessee with camera in hand. Excellent. The internet is spotty on the trace, so I may be in and out of the challenge. Fair enough. So, yeah, well, that's good if you've got your camera on hand. Well, so it's negative space, Robert. So while you're driving along and you're looking at the incredible scenery all the way you go, look out for notions of negative space. Think about gaps between mountains, gaps between buildings, gaps between, I don't know, a garage and a truck. This idea of what's the space between or around something. Because what we're talking about then is this is the negative space challenge. So to get a little bit of introduction about, well, actually, no. Let's finish the welcome comments first, and then I'll come on to what it's all about. So April says, greetings all from a sunny Long Island, New York. Glad to hear you've got your camera with you, Robert. Susan says, hello from a sunny but also windy Kakubri. Early this morning felt distinctly autumnal. Another trip, Robert? I think you're just a hobo at heart. So, yes, I'm in Kakubri, 9 miles down the road here. It is varied weather today. We've had a couple of downpours. Don't know whether you've had them in Kakubri or not. Well, no, we've not actually. No. Yes, we did have one, though, certainly this morning. It keeps getting overcast and then it becomes sunny, but it is very windy. So a little bit of everything today. Viji says, good evening, friends, from a drizzling Chennai. Drizzling. Now, interestingly, when you say drizzling here in the UK, you generally think of, it's raining, not very nice. But given the way you have such a kind of long dry season, I imagine now if we're just coming into the wet season, you would probably be quite enjoying the drizzle there, Viji. Correct me if I'm wrong. Janet says, hi from a warm, sunny Mississauga in Canada. John says, hello all from a great day in central Ohio. Oh, great day is nice to hear. Marilyn says, hello all from a sunny Colorado. April says, nice idea, Susan. I guess that's about the idea of the viewers poll. Nadia says, hi from a sunny Fife. And Robert says, I am a hobo. Hobo is such an American word. It's not one we use in the UK. It's one I only know from American films. Interesting. So it's kind of interesting, I think, words and how they can have certain subtle inflections. There's the notion of the tramp, the hobo, but there's also that slightly romantic idea of the person who's just free and goes travelling. They're sort of, and it isn't restricted by, held down by living in one place in society. Viji says, light shower and enjoying having a cup of coffee, gazing at the rain and watching the podcast. Ah, well, doesn't that sound wonderful? I'd join you, but unfortunately I have to present it. Yeah. Right, okay, so this is the negative space challenge. So what is negative space? Negative space, what I talked about, if you want to know more about this, go back 2 episodes to episode 253. Where I go quite in depth about the notion of negative space. Negative space sometimes gets attached to minimalism because what we're really talking about is the notion of space around the subject or space between subjects. And to be honest, that's where I really have my most interest in the notion of negative space. But it can also apply to minimalism where you create more space around a subject. And that kind of is that notion that really the space is an important feature of the image, that if you had less space or too much space, that if the space balance wasn't right, then somehow the photo wouldn't work as well. But if you can get the negative space, the bit that isn't the subject, that isn't about the key, what you tend to think of as the key part of the photo, but that space can still play a part, then it's knowing how to make the most of what isn't there, rather than, generally speaking, when we're photographers, we're focusing on what is there. There's a flower, there's a bird, there's a car, there's a castle, there's a whatever it is that we're focusing on. The negative space is the bit that isn't the subject. And if that's not interfering with your image, maybe it's out of focus, or maybe it's just against a clear sky, maybe it's just against a plain black background. That space is generally there to draw our attention to the subject. But that space is not empty. That negative space can have an impact on the image. And so this is primarily, brief summing up of what I was talking about 2 weeks ago. So then I set this negative space challenge. We've had all these images sent in, and we're going to go through them and see how different people have approached this notion of negative space and how it's been incorporated into their images. What have we got else here? Robert says, I prefer being a flaneur. Flaneur. I'm going to have to look that one up. Viji says, good to have you. Meg says, yes, hello everyone. I'm now back from the podcast. Blackpool was fantastic. That's right, she wasn't here last week. Viji says, good to have you back this week, Meg. April says, glad to hear you had a great time, Meg. And Meg saying thank you. Right, okay, so let's make a start on this. So I think what we will do is we will start with Susan. And if I flip over here to Susan, so now this one is, Susan says, I attach my submission for the negative space challenge, which I have called Not a Spider's Web. So, despite your first ideas, this is not a spider web. She goes on to say, although it has similarities to a web, it is in fact a macro shot of melted glue sticks attached to the rim of a jar with a little milk in the bottom of the jar. I then placed a multicoloured light underneath the jar, sprayed the glue stick threads with water, and this is the result. This is only one of about 20 rubbish images, but that's photography. So yeah, I mean, a little bit of self-deprecation there, but Susan's quite right in that notion of that what happens when we're doing photography, most of our photos, or a lot of our photos, don't tend to work. But that's okay. As I've talked on many occasions before, the idea is that each of the photos that we get wrong or doesn't work are a stepping stone towards getting it right, and we should celebrate, we should enjoy, we should expect to have that process. If every single photo you take works perfectly, then you're not pushing yourself, you're not trying anything new, you're only sticking with what's familiar. Or you are being incredibly lucky. It's like having a pair of dice and rolling a double six every single time you roll it. It just doesn't really happen. And that's okay. As we grow for photography, what you learn from the photos that don't work. The photos that do work, you get the praise for, and that's great, we all want the praise, but you don't tend to learn very much from them, because by the time it's working, you've solved all the problems to get it to work. So you're not learning anything new. Where you learn is when you go click, you look in the back of the camera or on the computer or tablet or whatever, and you go, oh, that hasn't quite worked. What do I need to do to fix it? Maybe I need to move the camera a little bit. Maybe I need to change the settings. Maybe I need to change the light. There's all sorts of things that you might need to change. And by going through that process, that's how we learn, okay? So this then, although it looks very much like a spider's web, isn't. It's glue sticks sprayed with water, macro shot. It's shot from above over so the glue sticks are across the jar. We can't see the rim where they are, but she's got a little bit of milk at the bottom and then a coloured light, multicoloured lights underneath. Quite possibly, I would guess, the stuff I've seen with Susan before, might even be something like an iPad or tablet, which has got a coloured pattern on it. And that's quite a good way of just doing something to create a little light, especially if you're wanting it blurred and out of focus like this. So this idea then is very much like the web, where negative space is all about the space between the lines, okay? So it's not just about, I mean, although we're thinking, we've got these wonderful lines and then we've got these wonderful droplets of water, and then the droplets of water are becoming like little pearls, jewels, which are it's sort of way they're creating little almost magnifying glasses and showing the pattern underneath, and all these little repeats and bubbles, and they look like little glass beads, and it's very beautiful, it's very attractive. But it wouldn't make any sense if we didn't have all the gaps around it. So in terms of a good starting point for a negative space, I thought I would start here. So a nice one from Susan. So thanks very much for sending that one in, Susan. Viji says, Blackpool is noted for its beach. Hope you brought home a souvenir. Good to know you had a good holiday. April says, very creative. Viji says, oh, this is lovely. Marilyn says, I love this image. Susan. John says, great shot, Susan. Great idea. And Viji says, perfect shot for the challenge, Susan. Right, okay, next up then, we're going to move on to, now have I mixed this up? I have. Okay, so yes, next up is Andy. Now, one sec, actually, I realise what I've done here. Oh no, come on, come on, come on, come on. Don't tell me I deleted Andy's. No, where is Andy? Ah, this is terrible. I've got Andy here somewhere. I know. Ah, this is, right, not entirely sure what I've done here, but somehow I seem to have missed out Andy's blurb. Okay, bear with me one moment, and I am going to just see if I can find what Andy wrote. Okay, yes. So let's flip over to here, and this is Andy's shot, which I have to say is rather cool. Andy says, this was taken in Marrakesh, Morocco. A local trader was standing in a doorway checking stuff on his phone. I processed it to take advantage of the highlights and frame creating a dark frame for the portrait through the light hitting the ornate grille, which adds a sense of context. Now, Andy also then said that he was travelling off to Italy today, so he won't be able to catch the show. So hopefully he'll watch it on catch up. But wow, what an image! So this, what Andy's done here then is here what we're talking about is the negative space is suffused throughout the photo. The highlights are what we're really seeing is high contrast. The grille, the gate behind is really catching the light, and that streak of light that comes down here is what's really kind of then emphasizing that, and there's the dark space around the street trader, which is what's really making this photo. So to use that notion of negative space without all these darks, I mean, it would still be an interesting photo, but it becomes emphasized, it becomes intensified, it becomes distilled, this notion that what we're looking at, having that high contrast, and the brain starts kind of filling in the gaps as we look at it. And because we then our brains start trying to fill in those gaps, trying to kind of, it means that we become more involved with the picture. And so the picture feels deeper, richer, because we're placing something of ourselves within it. It's not one of these pictures which tells you everything you need to know in a glance. It catches our attention, but then we need to keep looking at it. The longer we look at it, the richer it kind of becomes. So this is a wonderful example of good use of negative space, where the highlights are really there showing us what's there, and the darks are really giving us that negative space. Is what's really kind of emphasizing the bits about. So yeah, lovely photo. Comments coming in. What have we got? Susan's thanking everybody for the lovely comments on her picture, and April says great catch, Andy. Viji says, oh, what a shot. Nadia says great image, Andy. Susan says, OMG, Andy, love the lighting, perfect in black and white. Marilyn says, well done, Andy. And Viji says, classic click, great portrait. So yeah, great photo there, Andy. And yeah, really good use of negative space. So next, what we're going to talk about then is Marilyn. And Marilyn's a very different kind of photo use of negative space in this. So Marilyn says, Kim, fog and mist is highly unusual in Colorado, where we have strong sunshine most of the time. However, this morning, a low cloud had actually settled over the countryside, and it gave everything this ethereal look. The sky and low cloud actually became the negative space surrounding the subject of the tree. I was able to capture it just prior to sunrise, so the colours were diffused in the mist. And so yeah, look, if we look at this, is sort of that beautiful, soft, cloud, foggy, misty morning just before sunrise. You can practically sort of smell or sort of feel that sort of dampness in the air. And this is one of those interesting ones where you have that kind of, where the tree has become silhouetted. And which bit is the negative space? in some ways, if you focus on the idea of the picture being about the tree, then obviously the sky and the mist are kind of the negative space. And yet another way of looking at this is because of that beautiful kind of splash of the sort of soft oranges and yellows and then the grey strip, is that the tree itself becomes a negative space placed onto that. And in that way that we talked about 2 weeks ago, silhouettes occupy a sort of particular place within the notion of negative space, as in there's kind of two ways that you can read it as to which is actually counting as a negative space. So yeah, really interesting photo. And I really like the soft colours. I think with something like this, you could go black and white and it would work well. But there is something rather beautiful about the softness of the colours, which I think work well with that. So yeah, lovely shot there, Marilyn. And you know, especially if you never really tend to get, as you say, mist and fog are really rare in Colorado. What a lovely sort of opportunity, and great that you took the opportunity to sort of notice it and then grab your camera as well. So often, by the time we've noticed something's useful or interesting, we either don't have our camera with us, or by the time we've got the camera, it's disappeared. So yeah, lovely one there, Marilyn. Thank you. What else have we got? Oh, April says, wow, nice, Marilyn. Viji says, quite ethereal indeed. Thank you for taking us with you. I could feel the chill. Susan says, lovely soft image, Marilyn. Excellent. Well, next up we have Nurije, and have I got where? No, we don't. We have April. There's definitely something wrong here with the order. I thought I had... Yep, okay, we'll go with April. Sorry, the order I've put the pictures in isn't lining up with the orders with which I put the text in. I thought yesterday I put together all these notes, all these bits and pieces. I thought everything was going to be fine. Turns out I was wrong. So anyway, we will go for April. So here is April's photo. So April... where are we? Says, for the negative space challenge, I'm going to submit a photo of a sulphur butterfly that was taken in Pennsylvania. Usually these butterflies can't rest for a second, but they were so happy with this field of flowers, I was able to take a close-up shot. And that's lovely, that is, because I know that one with butterflies, insects and stuff like that. You know, you've got to have the patience of a saint to be able to do. So many of these things, they land, and by the time you've got your camera out, even if you've got your camera lined up, you know, by the time you notice it, bam, it's gone. Or you're slightly further away, you try and get a little bit closer, the slightest movement, and whoop, they fly away. So lovely kind of capture here. Now, what April's doing is she's using the notion of negative space around the butterfly. And so the background, while we can see that it is grasses, other bits of plant, they are so out of focus that they become a negative space. It's just a sort of soft patterning, really, and it doesn't. And all it does is it kind of it adds to the overall feel, where the background is a bit part player supporting the main subject. So again, you could, if you shot this against a black background, that would work just as well, except for the fact that I think this sort of the soft greens give you that little bit more sense of a place, rather than, you know, the butterfly being in some kind of artificial setting. And the green, that lovely little splash of purple of the flower underneath really complements the green. What have we got here? So, Marilyn's happy with her feedback. Susan says, never seen a sulphur butterfly, April, well captured. This is true, I've never seen one like that either. Around here, red admirals, I think, seem to be one of the big ones. And cabbage whites. Or is it a red admiral? Suddenly I have my doubts. I just don't know my botany, flora, fauna. I'll stick to the photography. Marilyn says, beautiful, April. And Viji says, it's very tough to take to click a butterfly. Yellow and pink goes well together, and we could feel the depth. Actually, you say yellow. It's certainly more green on my screen, but then again, sulphur, you tend to think of yellow. Maybe it's, you know, maybe there's something. I don't know. Who's seeing it as greenish and who's seeing it as yellowish, or is it more of a kind of yellowy green? Viji says, yes, a black background would make the butterfly brighter, but you would lose the texture of the nature. Okay, so next up then, John says, beautiful butterfly shot, and I like the background. So next we will do, Robert, yes. So Robert sent in this one. Now, Robert says this is a neon art piece in the Modern Art Museum in Fort Worth. Not much edits, mostly in camera. Not the best idea, but I believe it hits on the negative space aspect. I assume this is what the artist was going for, since his exhibition had all the lights turned off. And in a staircase of all places. Don't they know there are disability laws about that? Okay, so what we have here, Robert's picture, is there's a neon art installation here, and if we zoom in, now we get a better sense of what's going on. We can see these neon tubes, different colours, different bits of light, crisscross pattern. Interestingly though, it looks like there's a hint of a chair or some back of a chair or something like that there. Some kind of light bouncing off, whether it's a bit of curtain or whether there's or some kind of shimmer there. A little bit of reflection down on the wall as well. So what Robert's noticed with this particular installation is that there's a notion of, because it's in the dark, obviously makes the light stand out a bit more, but it also means that the exhibition itself is incorporating the notion of negative space. The darkness around is part of the installation. Now, what I would say about this is if we go back to the full photo here, I think there is a slight problem, Robert, with the fact that there's too much dark around. This isn't really how we would see it. And I think at this point, your actual installation kind of gets lost. And this is an interesting one. It's about the balance of how much negative space we put in there. What have we got? Just interesting here. April's confirming it is called a yellow sulphur. Viji says, Robert, I loved it when Kim zoomed in. Giant hashtags. Yes, and okay, so here's the point. She loved it when I zoomed in. When I zoom into about here, it suddenly makes a lot more sense. You can zoom in this far and still have the negative space. Let me just open this in Photoshop for a moment. Because I think with this, there's just too much negative space with the picture, so that the actual subject kind of gets lost. So it's a really interesting bit. But if we were to sort of take this down and then really crop it in, something like that. So maybe you could even come in a little bit closer, something like this. And now let's, so I have to lean past here to actually see some of the tools past the camera. So I think then something like this is actually, it still incorporates all the sense of negative space, which is a touch too much on the right, but gives us that sense of colour. And then for all the fact that we've got this lovely sense of colour here, I think you could probably bring, that we can see over on the left here, this sort of hint of colour. And I think a little bit more brought out with that. If I just duplicate that layer, what I will do is I will go to the dodge tool and go to the mid-tones, and I'll have it quite strong for the moment. Just to try and bring it up quickly, I'll put it about 50%. And what I will start doing is, over on the left in this kind of reflection bit, I'm just going to kind of run over that a little bit, so these colours stand out just a touch more. And then also I think a little bit of reflection on that step underneath. So we'll just see if we can bring, is there anything coming out on that? Not much on the bottom. I'll tell you what, let's put that onto shadows then, and just, there we go. So just bring out a little bit more colour there, a little bit more colour here. Now if I pull this back, you can see we've gone from that to that. So we've gone from the we just brought out a little bit of that reflection on the step below and the whatever that material is over on the left. And I think that then really creates something. And what the picture is now about is you've got your installation and you've got little patches of reflection, but we still have all this dark space around it and between the installation and the reflections, okay? And I think this then becomes a much more powerful notion of the use of negative space. When you're too far out, there's so much around that you're not necessarily, that essentially the subject itself has become diminished. Whereas you can zoom in, get in closer, but then still use a negative space, then it becomes that much more powerful. And I really kind of think something like this is kind of what you would see in your head, is what you would see, because you would end up filtering out a lot of the other negative space, just not even thinking about it. Your eyes zoom in, a bit like when you look at the moon in the sky. Your brain filters out most of the rest of the sky and it tends to zero in on the moon. Consequently, you tend to think the moon is much larger in the sky than it actually is. Okay, so what have we got? Meg says that's incredible. April says, I like the colours, great zoomed in. Robert says, agreed, the crop should have done that. Susan says, great colours, Robert. I thought it was psychedelic guitar neck at first. That'd be a fun one. Marilyn says, love the crop, interesting image. Robert says, your crop is exactly what you would see being there. Okay, that's nice bit of feedback. Viji says, loving the colour in the dark background. Love Kim's edit. And Robert says he likes the edit. Okay, excellent, good. Glad that you found that useful. So, next up then, what we're going to do is we'll go to Nurije. Okay, so this was the one that I've mixed up on my... So Nurije then has this one, and Nurije says, this is my entry for the negative space challenge. Took this last weekend when I went to see the Red Arrows display in Sidibeth. Now, in a way, this kind of is where we're echoing the same kind of themes that we were talking about with Robert just now, which is, so what we have is in this case, we've got this biplane with the Union flag. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry, come back to that. Got the Union flag around it, painted over it. But we've also got this trail of smoke coming out the back. And so our eye gets drawn very much here. The trail of smoke then becomes a leading line up to the plane, and then we've got the blue sky around it. And this becomes one of those interesting bits, which is, if we're talking about the negative space, obviously it's the sky that becomes the negative space. And the question is how much negative space do you want? Very often, there's a feeling where I've talked before about with photos, that there's a sense of sometimes it's interesting, either you want to be closer in or you want to be further out. I think this is a reasonable balance, and I don't think there's anything overly wrong with this, but I just want to show you what happens if now what I will do for background is I will go to just content aware fill for the moment. And look what happens if we just expand this out a little bit, something like this. And now the plane itself becomes a little bit smaller. And then maybe if we expanded it out again, then what happens is the negative space starts to take on more of a bigger ratio, a bigger proportion of what the image is about. Perhaps then if we were to pull this down to here, something like that. You see, we can kind of keep expanding out and out and out. And the more we expand out, the smaller the actual subject becomes, and the bigger player the background, the negative space, actually tends to take up. So when we get something like this, it's now not so much about the plane, it's about the sky, and then the plane emphasizes that vast space of the sky. But of course, at this point, we've missed the subject. It wasn't the sky that Nurije was trying to photograph. So this is kind of crossing over then, just to kind of carry on with that theme from Robert, that if you go too wide, then actually what happens is the negative space then overwhelms the actual story. The negative space is there to enhance the narrative you're trying to get across. And if we go too big, then we can lose it. Now, of course, the other thing is that, well, okay, let's just go back to Nurije's original version, and what we end up, another way of doing this is in fact to where you get in closer, where what you do, if actually I don't even need to do a crop with this, I'll just use the zoom, where if you were to be able to really fill the screen with it like this, what happens is actually the gaps between the wings of the plane and the tail and round here, that starts to become the dominant part of the negative space. And if you're really zoomed in, so we've only then got part of the plane in shot, then actually the space, the gaps become that much more important in terms of negative space. So in terms of trying to get that sense of what counts as negative space and how you might use it in any given situation. Now, I think, don't get me wrong, I think this photo is fine. I think the balance is good for what Nurije was setting out to achieve. I'm just trying to use this as an example, certainly following off of Robert's experience, but also how we might take this idea of negative space. So to understand that you can give it more space, but we've got to be careful about overloading it. Or we can kind of zoom in and get the space in the object itself. But at that point, we've lost Nurije's idea of this being it in the sky. Right, a couple of comments here. We have Susan says, great image, Nurije. Viji says, Nurije, beautiful shot. April says, nice catch, will be fun to watch. Viji also says, Nurije, you are truly lucky to have got this shot at the time of the challenge. What a catch. Marilyn also says, great catch. John says, fun shot of an interesting subject. Janet says, I'm getting ideas for a couple of air shows that should be coming up in September. Too late for the challenge. Doesn't matter. I wouldn't worry too much about that, Janet, about the idea of being late for the challenge. This is part of the point, is the fact that because we've done this challenge, then hopefully this is giving you ideas precisely so that you can go to the air show and approach it with slightly different ideas in mind. So if you happen to have a good zoom lens when you're at the air show, try the bits where you can get in as close as possible, but also pull back out. Do a series of click, 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 click as you zoom back out. And then when you come to sort of check them on a computer later, you'll get a sense of how the narrative changes depending on the amount of space around or within. And likewise, if you get one of these air shows where planes are going across each other and getting in close, the gap between those planes becomes really interesting. So yeah, thank you very much for sending that one in, Nurije. Great shot. A quick little reminder, I suppose, but roughly about halfway through in terms of the number of images. So if you happen to find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and would like to support them, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And the Buy Me a Coffee is now, I've got this option where you can tick a box. So if you are one of these who occasionally sort of likes to do one, but would like to sort of do it on a regular basis, you can tick a box that says pay monthly. So you click it, and every 4 weeks or once a month or something like that, then the coffees come out, and you can choose whether you want to have the 1, 3, 5, whatever it is you wish to do. I will come out on a monthly thing. If you are one of these who tends to buy slightly more on a regular or weekly basis, then you can I suppose each week for 4 weeks go back and tick it, and then it will just run for itself. Or you could do 4 times the amount. Whichever way you wish to do it. Coffees are always appreciated. Anyway, not sure. I won't keep trying to do the hard sell on the coffees, but they are there. It does help to support. I always think it's a little bit like if I'm busking and I've got a little hat out. That's what the coffees are for. Now, the other thing, actually, while we've got the bits and pieces up here, just to remind anybody, if you've if you're looking to send images in, if you're looking to send questions in, if you've got ideas for the podcast, whether it's things like the polls and what have you, or any other suggestions for topics, then you can email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. If you want to, or you can go to we've got a Flickr group, groups/UPwKA, Facebook also groups/UPwKA. And these are places where you can, certainly in the Flickr group, there's a layout there where you can start discussions going and submit images. Facebook there for anybody who wants to use it. And of course, like I say, there's email as well. So yeah, plenty of ways that you can interact. And of course, don't forget, while you're here, click like on the video. That always helps, helps the algorithms. So like the video, as long as you like it and feel it's worth doing at any rate. So yeah, click the like. Do the subscribe if you haven't done it. And also, if you happen to be watching this on playback as well, then actually you don't have to, you might not be able to leave a comment in the live comments, but you can leave a comment down below. And I've started to discover that actually comments down below in the actual, underneath the video there, apparently that helps the algorithms too. If I get various people commenting, leaving little bits and pieces, then I think that lets YouTube know that these are videos worth watching because people have gone as far as commenting. So if you want to help the podcast as well that way, you can please leave comments. Right, okay. So what have we got? So Janet was getting ideas. Viji says, yes, Janet, please do click and maybe you can see them in critique. Yeah, well, of course, that's something else you can do as well. You play with the images, you can always send them in for feedback and critique. And for that matter, even if you have a few that you're really pleased with that you quite like to show off, once again, you can stick them in the link to them from your Flickr account or put them in the Facebook group, because that's another part of this group that we have here. Is it's fun to get the support and show off and our bits and pieces, and there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of a smug moment if you feel you've got a picture you're pleased with. You can put them in for critique and feedback, of course, but sometimes actually all we want is somebody else to say, nice shot, like that one. What else have we got? Janet says, big air show this weekend, but I don't like the crowd and traffic for that one. Fair enough. Nadia says, lovely image. Robert says, buy me a coffee only allows one monthly order, not able to do a monthly per week. Okay, that's interesting to know. Photography Addict says, hi Photography Addict. Now you were with us last week, I think you popped in, or last week or the week before, can't remember exactly. Was it Matt? Could be Matt. If it isn't, you can tell me. So yes, welcome. Back to then the notion of the images that people have sent through for the negative space challenge. So what are we going to do next then? So next up, we go to Viji, and Viji sent in. No, not that one. That one. Yes. Photography Addict says, yes, I am Matt. Had a night shift last week, so I was sore. Oh, right. I hope you're feeling better now. Okay, so Viji sent in this one of two chess knights facing each other, and it's very much this notion of the negative space as well. So there's the space around them and there's the space between them. Viji says, with regard to this one, where are we? Viji says, hi Kim, this is the photo for this week's challenge. I took several photos that involved different types of style where the negative space created a shape. I tried different positions and worked and different chess pieces, but the knight worked best. Yeah, and so this is it. It's something. It is worth playing around with different pieces, placing them at different distances together. And again, this is one of those interesting ones where, if you take the image and the knights are a certain distance together, and if you were to take those images and take the knights at different sizes. So, I mean, for example, okay, let's just show you what I mean here. So let's open this with Photoshop. Now, what I could do here is if I go to select subject, and what's it going to do? Yeah, hopefully that's great. It's selected subject. I'll just copy that and paste that on a separate layer. And then what I will also do is I will take one of these layers. Let's say we'll just take the white knight. I will cut that and paste that on to a separate layer as well, and then on this layer, let's just, for the sake of ease of this, we'll just I'll create a black background. So I need to just turn that to black, create black there, and now I can place these knights back on it. And what I want to do is show you what happens. So that was roughly the space that Viji had between them. But if we can now move these independently. And you can see that if we shift them like that, it creates a slightly different mood to it. And if we move them further apart, it creates a different feel again. And if we move them right to the edges, it creates a different feel again. So this notion of the negative space becomes a really critical part, especially when you have two subjects, in this case the knights, and especially when they are facing each other. The space between them makes all the difference. It's rather like, I saw a little video earlier on which was talking about just social interaction, and that we have different zones of closeness with people. There's a sort of public zone where we have a certain space between when you stand next to somebody. Then there's a kind of friendship zone. Then there's a kind of closeness zone, and then there's a kind of sort of intimate zone where people just get closer and closer. And certainly we know it ourselves when we're out there mixing in public, or there's people we meet, we're at a meeting somewhere, and suddenly they seem really too close to us. They seem far closer to us than we are comfortable with, given the fact that we don't know them very well. And interestingly, different cultures have different ideas of what that level of closeness is. So in certain countries, you can be very close and that's felt as very natural, but that same level of closeness in other countries can just feel too close. And then you can have this sort of almost bizarre situation whereby as one person comes in close because that's where the distance they feel they ought to be, the other one backs off a bit because they feel more comfortable with a little bit more space. Then this person feels there's too much space, so they move in, so they back off, so they move in, so they back off. One person is constantly thinking, why is this person being distant from me? The other person is constantly thinking, why is this person so close to me? So yes, sometimes cultural difference comes into that as well. But interesting, visually, what we're talking about though is this notion that you can see what a difference it makes and how much that space plays a part. So keep that one in mind. If we're talking about this notion of developing your understanding of photography, and particularly in this episode, all about the notion of your understanding your negative space, then the amount of space between subjects plays a crucial part in the narrative that's being created by your photo. So yeah, nice one there, Viji, and thank you for sending that one in. A good excuse for me to demonstrate what was going on. So actually, okay, a couple of comments. First, April says, cute Viji. Matt says, for context, I had to move a package which is like 200 kilograms combined. Oh, no wonder you're sore after that. I hope you're recovered now, though. You have to be careful, though, because you do your back injuries take a long time to recover from. Marilyn says, nice Viji. Susan says, that works really well, Viji, particularly the contrast in colours. John says, the photo really relies on negative space. Good idea and well done. Viji says, as long as the nights are comfortable, I'm able to understand you, Kim. And she says, thanks, everyone. Matt says he is recovering. Excellent. Cool. So next photo I want to take you to then is Meg. Now, some of you who, well, we're going back a couple of years when I showed this photo, but Meg created this one, which is a great one, I think, for really kind of expanding on what I was just talking about with Viji. So as Meg says, hi Dad, this is my entry from when I was taking a behind the scenes at your photo shoot in the hair salon. So yeah, a couple of years ago, I was doing a photo shoot, and some of you may remember I did this more kind of Wes Anderson style photo with oversaturated pastels in a hairdressing salon with two women in vintage wedding dresses. And my daughter Meg was with me doing some little behind the scenes photography, and she took this one of Chelsea sitting just sort of in between shots. And she went right over by the mirror. So we've got, and the way it's taken, and then we get a cinematic crop, put it into black and white. And so the original Chelsea is over here on the left, and then we've got the mirror down the middle, and then the reflection over on the right. And like the nights really pushed out to the edge of the photo, having these two right at the edge of the photo changes the feel of it. And what's quite interesting about this is, I think traditionally your standard kind of way of doing a shot like this would be much more rule of thirds. You would have a bigger gap on the outside of both of these two. You would have probably the gap between the model and the mirror, that kind of gap. You would have that amount on either side of the Chelsea and her reflection to give you that sort of sense of the model and her reflection was sort of sitting kind of on those third lines. But this, by having them pushed right to the outside, really takes on that notion of, it stretches your point of, oh right, okay, this is not what I was expecting to see, and you find yourself looking at it longer, and you find your eyes flipping back and forth. The sink in the middle also has, with its, and the little various squishy bottles for hair creams and all the rest of it sitting in the middle, also reflected, but primarily there's this great big gap between them, and there is something, I think, quite engaging. It's difficult to I don't think you sort of look at this and just glance past. I think you look at it and then you look at it again with something like this, and that negative space between is really powerful in terms of this. So, like, to go back to this notion of play with it, experiment with it. Don't feel that it just always has to be a standard kind of distance. That the amount of distance has profound effect on how we view the image and how the narrative takes over. April says, yes, I like this shot, Meg. Marilyn says, great shot, Meg. Susan says, brilliant shot, Meg. Kim had better watch out. And Viji says, Meg, I'm suddenly reminded of Cleopatra. Absolutely brilliant. God, Cleopatra, yeah, depends which film you've been seeing. I think there's also Marge Simpson as well with the hair. Anyway, that would need to be yellow and blue colour scheme. Right, okay, so next photo we want to move on to here then is Nadia. And where are we at? Boom, boom, boom. Yep. So Nadia says, this is my photo for the negative space challenge. It is Goatsbeard, Tragopogon, Pratensis. There's a Latin name in here which I am absolutely murdering. Tragopogon pratensis. That you can look it up. Which is a larger version of the dandelion seed. Okay, it's a bit like a dandelion seed. I'm now on safer ground. Some people call it a salsify seed or salsify seed. I feel like I've lost my ability to pronounce, to speak, to work out how words are sounding. Salsify, looks like a bit like salsify. A salsify seed. So yes, this idea then, very much that notion of a bit like a kind of close-up dandelion seed. A little bit also very, well, quite web-like. And I suppose going back to a bit like Susan's picture at the beginning, what we have here is it's not just the little water droplet sitting in the centre of the seed, which is rather beautiful, but it's the gaps. It's not just the gap around, but the gaps between. There's layers of gaps. There's the tiny little gaps between the little fibres where we can kind of zoom right in here. They're all having an effect, much like a web. But then there's a sort of slightly bigger gaps between the kind of the thicker stems of the bit. So these kind of create a gap, and gaps in themselves. And then there's the space around it. So this is an interesting one, that actually the negative space is there or changes depending on how close in we go. As we move in, there's more negative space we discover in all these little gaps between, and we can even move into this level. I mean, out of focus at this point, but you get this really kind of abstract feel at this point, but where the negative space is still really important. So yeah, nice shot there, Nadia. Thanks for sending that one in. Meg says, thank you very much to everybody for your comments. And April says, it's cool, Nadia. Love the macro nature. Yeah, macro is definitely one of these places where you can sometimes have that extra bit of fun with a negative space. Susan says, love this, Nadia. I've been looking for Salsify, but I can't find it. Okay, so yeah, need it. That notion of looking around, presumably different times of the year as well, different kinds of, I think, yeah, rose bay willow herb. It's another one which gives really interesting little shapes as well. Right, okay, next up, yes, this is an interesting one from Janet. So Janet says, I've attached my entry for the Negative Space Challenge. This was shot at the CNE, which is the Canadian National Exhibition, sort of similar to the State Fair in the US. Not sure if there's a UK equivalent of it. So this is a new attraction called Dinner in the Sky. Okay, let's zoom in a little bit here and try and get a sense of what this actually is. So she said, quote from what the Dinner in the Sky is. This is a high-flying dining experience suspended 150 feet in the air to breathtaking 360-degree views of the CNE Midway and offers the opportunity to sip and dine in a chef's table environment where each course is prepared and served in front of an intimate group of guests, up to 22 seats. So this is where you get to go out for dinner. You go out for dinner, you sit down at a table, and this table is then hoisted 150 feet up into the air. And so you get to fine dining with the most incredible views, but at the same time, it is like some kind of fairground ride whereby you are so high up that I'm sure some people wouldn't be able to actually swallow. Yeah, it's one of those things which you will find either absolutely thrilling and exciting, or so terrifying that you wouldn't be able to eat and probably wouldn't go up there in the first place. I can see how that would split in our family. I know full well my wife Maggie you would never get her up there in 100 years, whereas me and Meg would be both going, oh, that could be fun. Oh, Susan says, oh, scary, Janet. I couldn't possibly do that. April also says that would be scary. Very unique. Nadia says, I found it. Oh, with regard to the salsify plant, she found it at the side of a path but has never seen it again. Viji says, wow, Janet. Meg says, that's fantastic. Nadia says, wow. Viji says, I'm terribly scared of heights. Janet says, I wouldn't want to do it either, but was cool to shoot. And expensive too. I can imagine this wouldn't be a cheap thing. I mean, you've got all the cost of a fairground ride, and you've got the cost of a meal too. So yes, I can't imagine it would be cheap. This is an interesting one with this. This is another one a bit like Nurije's plane in the sky. So the sky itself is becoming in the negative space. Interesting with this is where you would actually necessarily combine. So it does feel like there's a lot of space over to the left. Whereas what you're actually saying this is about, the real thing about this, is the height. Might it have been possible to photograph it whereby you actually make more of a point of the height rather than the width? So, for example, this is going to be very brief again, we'll do the content-aware background, so that rather than it being over the left, you brought it down, I'm assuming with something like 150 feet height. You could end up with something. Now, maybe that line would carry on drawing down, doesn't really matter. Point being with this is that if you do something like this, you then get that bigger sense of height. But we do also have a slight problem here, that is how obvious is what it actually is. Now, you've explained it, so it becomes we're in the know, and then when we look into it, we can certainly see that, oh yes, right, these will be seats and all the rest of it. But it's not necessarily as obvious when we're pulled back as far as that. So a little bit here, I think, depends on where it's going to be shown. And that's a kind of an interesting idea as well, is that when we're talking about photos which will work in one context and won't work in another. So if you have that notion of this great big space, that would work if it's a big poster size image where people are walking up. They can still clearly identify that it's people sitting around at a table dangling off the end of a crane, and they can sit back and go, whoa, that would be an experience. But if you were looking at this on a phone or a tablet, it's not necessarily quite so obvious what it is. And as such, you kind of, at that point, do you need to zoom in? And I think, again, if you were sort of zoomed in this kind of close, now, obviously we would need much more detail. You'd have to have a big zoom. We'd need a better resolution and all the rest of it. But just to give you an idea, if you came in this close enough for us to actually really see that it is seats and there's people around and people eating and fine dining, and then you notice the fact that there's a gap underneath them and all around them, then that gap becomes really powerful. Here what we're doing is we're playing with that notion of the negative space, is emphasizing that whole idea of the stomach churning drop, the big gap around. So either you need to get in close so we can see the detail, or we pull back out and get the sense of the drop and the size that's there. So yeah, a really interesting one, a great one to find. But I think, yeah, play around with the crop on something like that one, I would suggest, Janet. John says, wow, that would be different. Janet said, I tried to do the vertical camera, but I would have had crowds and midway in the ground. Yeah, I can, yes. And therein, of course, there is always the problem, is that what we're trying to do is balance up. Obviously, we don't want to necessarily have the crowds in. How much gap can you get? Emphasize, try and get as much in as you can before you start hitting the tops of people's heads. But, yeah, there is always this problem of, opportunity. It's a difference sometimes with trying to create a photo with a very specific aim in mind, and grabbing a photo being slightly more scavenger, I suppose, where we see an opportunity, we grab what we can, getting the best photo that you can out of the circumstances that you're in. And there might always be something where you think that could have been made slightly better because I had a different lens, or there was something different in the background, or even different weather conditions. But yes, we should always be looking to try and get the best possible photo we can under whatever circumstances we've got. But yeah, nice sense of space there, and yeah, intriguing idea. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in, Janet. And then, okay, finally then, last image I'm going to show is Anne from Texas. And then what we're going to do is I will go through I'll give you all the opportunity to vote then on what you consider to be your favourite. I'll run through the images just one last time so you can do them as well. But, oh, April has said, I would love to see those people's faces. Yeah. So this is Anne's. And Anne says, here's my image for the negative space. It was taken in northern Texas during the Snowmageddon that shut down most of Texas in 2021. That's right, we've seen various pictures over the last few years from Robert and Anne of Texas in the snow from the kind of big snowstorm. This one reminds me a little bit of Marilyn's one as well, whereby here we've got a clump of trees, and instead of mist, what we've got is we've got snow and a blank sky. And what Anne has done with this is turn it into black and white. And again, this becomes that almost sort of silhouetted idea, and we end up with that same kind of notion of which here is the negative space. We've got all this like kind of large sky and large plains, and then the clump of trees, which becomes almost a negative space within this. But at the same time, you could look at it the other way, where it's the clump of trees, and then having the negative space around it is giving you this sense of the vastness of the landscape. So lovely picture, and yes, Marilyn says, lovely Anne, feels a bit chilly. And it does. I think that the notion of the snow on the ground, but also the vastness of it, and the sort of realisation that if you've got wind with that snow, unless you can make it to that clump of trees, there's nowhere to hide from it. It's really going to cut and bite through. That sense of being exposed to the elements, I guess, is really what we're talking about here. April says, wow, I can feel the cold. Viji says, very high key, beautiful. Okay, so there we go. So that's been yeah, really interesting. So thanks ever so much to everybody who's sent in images. Now, what I'm going to attempt to do, and they might not be in absolute order here, but I'm now going to, there is a thing here, I'm going to click engage with the audience, start a poll. So ask a question. So question will be vote for your favourite. Try and spell all these things right. Vote for your favourite for the NSC, Negative Space Challenge. Right, okay, so now what I need to do is I need to click, well, I have Susan, and then Andy, and then Marilyn, so add option, Marilyn, and Nurije. No, actually, next one up is April. I'll do that in that order. Add option, April. Oh no! This is only giving me 4 options. That's terrible. That says start poll. Come on, I want more options. Okay, this is messing it up. I wanted to have more than... oh, okay, how do we get around this? Is it a... I don't want to do 3 separate polls. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I will try this now. Don't click straight away. I'm going to do 3 polls here. So, I'm going to attempt to do 3 polls here. So I'm going to click start poll. Then I'm going to start another poll. No, he's not letting me start a second poll. Ah, that's a shame. Okay. Okay, that's annoying. I didn't think this was going to happen. So apologies about this. So now I've got to think on my feet. Let's end the poll because that's not quite fair to... right. Okay, it's not quite the same if I pick 4 of them to vote for you to vote on. Okay. Yeah, April said you have to finish this one first, but we can't finish it if we've only got 4, because what I want to do is get 1 option from each of you. So there's 11 pictures to vote for. Now, I'll tell you what I could do. It does mean, though, that it's not an anonymous vote. Okay, what I will do is I will go through the images. And yeah, Viji says we can type the names here. So everybody gets to type a photo. So I'll go through the images first, and then I'll show you. Yeah, I'll show you each of the photos, and then each of you can type one name in of who you think ought to get the crowd favourite vote. Okay, so type into the comments and let me know. So I'm going to run through them carefully. So look, have a think, and then when you've seen each of the photos, type in your favourite, and then I'll top them up afterwards. So first off is Susan. So this one's Susan. So if you think this is your favourite, think Susan for the moment. Don't type it in just yet. Double check with the other ones. The next image is Andy with his Moroccan street trader. Third is Marilyn with Misty Colorado Morning. Fourth is April's Sulphur Butterfly. Fifth is Robert's Neon Art Installation. Sixth is Nurije's Biplane in the Sky. Seventh is Viji's chess pieces. Eighth is Meg's reflection of the bride in the hair salon. Ninth is Nadia's Goatsbeard seed. 10th is Janet's dining experience suspended in the sky. And 11th is Anne's copse of trees on a snowy Texan plain. So what I want you to do now is type into the comments here your favourite of that, and then I will tell you what the ones that the one that I'm going to do, and the one who gets the most comments and votes as such will get a bonus 20 smug points as part of the crowd vote. And in between now and then I will try and figure out how to, if there's another way of doing a poll in the comments before next time. We're just looking for the one vote, so don't worry too much about trying to put a top 3 or anything like that. So what have we got here? Okay, the other question, of course, the other bit is I'm not sure who else is going to, because not everybody might want to actually vote. You don't have to vote, it's not compulsory, but it's just one of those things whereby if you do vote, then it's all part of the fun of it as well, isn't it? Although by and large it looks like we probably have a fairly unanimous winner here. So far there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, 8. Okay. Oh, Marilyn's put in 3. April's put in oh no, she has put in 1. Meg's put in 1. Okay, are we there yet? Anybody else to vote? Now's the time to do it. Okay, I think that's probably everybody who's watching. So what we have then is Viji says Andy and Susan in that order for me. Okay, well, we'll just take your first one. So we've got Viji says Andy, Susan says Andy, Nadia says Andy, John says Andy, Matt says Andy, Janet says Andy, Marilyn says April, and then Meg and Maria. Maria? Nurije, I think is, yeah, Nurije. April says Susan and the web, and Meg says Robert. Okay, so it has, by far and away the biggest number of votes. For the crowd vote then is for Andy with his Moroccan street trader, and we'll just stick that one back up on the screen. Not that, there we go, this one here. So this is the crowd vote winning entry. So there we go. So bonus 20 smug points to Andy for that one. So now we come on to my top 3. So again, like I always say with these things, it's a bit of fun, and quite often with these things, the order of which I might have chosen things could change from day to day, could change from hour to, could change whether I've had my coffee or not. Don't get too hung up on it. But I will say that actually Andy was my top choice as well. It does tend to feel that it's what Andy's managed to do here. It's an really interesting image. You're kind of feeling like you've glanced over, you've caught this beautifully lit, beautifully shaped, but that use of negative space, and that's what this is about. This is about negative space. Negative space around the Street Trader really is enhancing the image. So congratulations to Andy. Andy gets a bonus 30 points from me, 20 points from the crowd, and of course 10 points for putting it in. Now, next up, my second choice here is Meg. Because this one here, again, encapsulates for me this notion of that use of negative space. And it's and it's the space between rather than just the space around. That is the space between Chelsea and her reflection that really create and make this image and give you that sense of narrative. So bonus second place, 20 points to Meg for this one. Oh, Robert's just come in with his vote and said Andy as well. Okay, so yeah, Andy thoroughly won that one. And my third place, my third place is Marilyn. There's something about this one. Again, it's that notion of the negative space into where the silhouette, and it's very close one between Anne and this one. Similar kind of shots. In the end, I feel I like the softness of the colours. I think those colours and the mist. I mean, both Anne's one with the snow and this one with Marilyn in the mist and the fog are very elemental. And the space around them is really giving that sense of being open to the elements. So they both work. In the end, my third place goes to Marilyn for this one. But I will throw out a couple of commendeds as well. I think Anne and Susan for the web and Viji for the nights. I will also give 5 points commended for those as well. So congratulations to everybody. I will have a little bit of fun after this, trying to work out all the all the points and everything else. But I will put them up in the Flickr group. Where are we? In the Flickr group here. There's a running total of Smug Points each month, and so as we move into September, then tomorrow I will have all the things up, and whoever has now, I know Andy's suddenly got a massive 60 points but Andy wasn't here to get the extra 5 by commenting live, and also several other people have already got points accumulated through the month where Andy wasn't taking part so much, so it's no guarantee that he's won. I think there will be probably somebody else who will have won the accumulation. Once I've worked out the points, I haven't got it all in my head at the moment. I will be in contact, and the winner will get to choose the topic and challenge for September. Okay, so thank you ever so much to everybody who sent in images, for everybody who's been here busy commenting and giving feedback. Now, next week will be a feedback session. So this is your chance to get genuine feedback, useful feedback on any kind of image that's giving you problems, where you've got sticking points, where you think, I kind of like this photo, but it isn't working and I'm not sure why. Or I've been putting it into competitions and it's never got the level of recognition that I feel it ought to. Or whatever it is, whether you're uncertain about the technical, the compositional, the lighting, the narrative, just the reaction to it. One of the best ways you can improve your photography is to get genuine feedback on it from a professional photographer, and it's free. Just send me your image and I will give you feedback. I've got space for 3, maybe 4 images for next week. So send in your images, as the earlier the better. Generally speaking, it's on a first come first serve basis. And I've got a funny feeling, I think Nadia, I've already got one from Nadia, sent me a couple of weeks ago, said for next time. So that's 1 space taken up already. So get your images in so that we can have a nice little, because any problem that you're up against, the chances are somebody else watching these videos will also have that problem, and it helps. So it's not just about you helping, you learning for you, it's helping everybody else to learn as well. So yeah, do send the images in, and we'll do that for next week. And then we'll also hopefully by then have an idea for a topic of what we're going to be doing on through September as well. Right, so quick little reminder, if you find the podcast useful, interesting, and you would like to entertaining and would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Last few comments, everybody sort of saying congratulations to people enjoying the team, have good weekends and weeks and all the rest of it. So yes, thank you once again, And I look forward to seeing you all next Sunday. Take care. Bye-bye.